It was late, my desk buried in financial fraud case files. When my phone vibrated, a strange credit alert. A very small smile touched my lips. Someone had just stepped into a battlefield I had already mined. They did not know the sweet little sister was a federal hunter of financial predators, and that predator was my own sister. My name is Natalie Whitaker. I am 33 years old. For the last 8 years, I have been a senior investigator for the Federal Office of Banking Integrity, or FOBIE. Our division is colloquially known as the Clean Room. We are the people who investigate the investigators, monitor the banks that monitor the transactions, and trace the digital footprints that organized criminals think they have erased. My job is not a job. It is a discipline. It requires an absence of emotional response and an absolute dedication to process. My workspace reflects this. I do not have photographs of family. I do not have novelty mugs or colorful sticky notes. I have a gray desk, a high-density ergonomic chair, and 3 monitors displaying encrypted data streams. The air in our section of the federal building is always chilled to 68 degrees and smells faintly of industrial solvent and pressurized air. The only sound, usually, is the distant hum of the central servers and the quiet, rhythmic tapping of keys. It was 10:18 p.m. on a Tuesday. The fluorescent lights overhead buzzed, casting a flat, shadowless light across my desk. I was deep in a cross-reference check involving shell corporations in Delaware and a network of compromised credit unions in the Southwest. My focus was absolute. Then my personal cell phone, lying face down on the desk blotter, vibrated once. It was not a call. It was a text alert from the credit monitoring service I pay for. A simple notification. A credit inquiry has been made on your file by Seaside National Trust. I stared at the name. Seaside National Trust. I have never banked with Seaside National Trust. I have never applied for a card, a loan, or a mortgage with them. The name was a blank, a piece of data that did not fit the pattern of my life. A civilian, perhaps even a normal federal employee, might have felt a jolt of adrenaline, a spike of panic, a violation, identity theft. They would have frantically dialed the bank's fraud department, their voice high and strained. My reaction was the opposite. The hum of the servers seemed to fade. The glare of the fluorescent lights sharpened. My heartbeat, which had been resting at a placid 55 beats per minute, settled into a slower, heavier rhythm. My vision narrowed, filtering out the peripheral data on my other screens, focusing only on the glowing white text on my phone. This was not panic. It was activation. My discipline isolates me from my family, but it was my family that taught me the discipline. They just never realized it. The alert on my phone vanished, replaced by a memory. It arrived fully formed, crisp and cold, like a high-resolution photograph. Easter, 3 months ago. We were at my parents' house in Westford, Northlake. The house is a sprawling beige suburban colonial that my father, Gordon, maintains with obsessive care. My mother, Marla, had covered every surface in pastel decorations and synthetic grass. The air smelled of baked ham and lilies. My sister, Sloane Whitaker, had arrived 2 hours late, making an entrance, as she always does. Sloane is the star. She is the Whitaker sister who shines. Where I am precise and quiet, Sloane is loud, expansive, and dazzlingly charismatic. She works in high-end public relations, a job that seems to involve attending galas and cultivating a very specific, very expensive image. She swept in, wrapped in a cream-colored coat I did not recognize, carrying a mint green leather handbag that I certainly did. It was a brand favored by celebrities, the kind that requires a waiting list and costs more than my monthly mortgage payment. "Sorry, everyone," Sloane kissed the air near my mother's cheek. The traffic from Riverton was just criminal. Riverton, the new city, the new life. "Oh, Sloane, honey, it is beautiful," my mother breathed, her hands fluttering not to me, her firstborn, but to the new handbag. "This old thing?" Sloane laughed, a bright, tinkling sound practiced to perfection. At dinner, my parents were captivated. Gordon and Marla Whitaker are good. Simple people who value appearances above all else. They are baffled by my quiet government job. With its steady salary and its dense acronyms, they do not understand what I do, and they suspect it is dreadfully boring. But Sloan, they understood. Sloan was success. "The new penthouse is just divine, Dad," Sloan said, twirling her wine glass. "It's just a temporary lease, while I figure out the market, but the view of the skyline?" "A penthouse," my father repeated, his chest swelling. He looked across the table at me, a brief, almost pitying glance. "Hear that, Natalie? Your sister, in a penthouse." "That is wonderful, Sloan," I said. My voice was even, calm, the safe daughter, the reliable, boring one. I watched her. I always watch her. It is the part of my job I cannot turn off. I watched her dismiss the cost of the apartment. I listened as she detailed the purchase of a brand new luxury SUV. A vacation to an exclusive island I knew for a fact cost 5 figures, and the constant stream of designer clothes. I did the math. I knew what her PR firm likely paid her. I knew the commission structure. I knew the bonus caps, the numbers she presented to the world. The lifestyle she was performing did not align with the income. The deficit was significant. It was a glaring red flag, invisible to everyone else at the table who was blinded by the shine. They saw a star. I saw a carefully constructed fiction, and fictions require funding. The ham was carved, the wine was poured, and I, the safe government employee, filed the data away. The memory dissolved. I was back in my office. The air was cold. My phone was in my hand. Seaside National Trust. I had to follow procedure. The first step in any investigation is to eliminate the most obvious variable. I needed to confirm that this was not a catastrophic misunderstanding. I unlocked my phone. I pulled up Sloan's contact. I put on the mask I always wear for them. The voice of Natalie. The sweet little sister. The boring one. I pressed call. It rang 3 times. "Natalie?" Her voice was impatient, loud, background noise suggesting a bar or restaurant. "Hey, Sloan. Sorry to call so late," I began, my tone light, almost apologetic. "I just got a weird notification, a credit inquiry from a bank called Seaside National Trust. I have never heard of them. It is probably just a computer glitch. But I was wondering, you would not happen to know anything about that, would you?" There was a pause, not a confused pause, a calculating one. It was half a second too long. Then, the scoff, sharp and dismissive. "Seaside? Seriously, Nat, no, why in the world would I know anything about your credit? That sounds like your kind of boring bank problem. I am in the middle of something. I have to go." She hung up. She did not say goodbye. She did not wait for my response. The line just clicked dead. I lowered the phone from my ear. I placed it back on the desk blotter, perfectly parallel to the keyboard. The denial was too fast. The deflection to my boring bank problems was a classic misdirection. The abrupt hang-up was confirmation. I sat motionless for perhaps 10 seconds. The mask of Natalie the sister dissolved. The face beneath was the one reflected in the dark monitor. Calm, cold, focused. This was Investigator Whitaker. I turned away from my personal phone. I placed my hands on my government keyboard. I logged into the Phoebe internal mainframe. It required a 24-character password and a 2-factor biometric scan. The system opened. It was a black screen with gray text, no logos, no welcoming interface. I navigated to the intake directory. I opened a new file. The system generated a case number, FW-31-9X. I began to type. I entered the name of the suspicious institution, Seaside National Trust. I entered the time of the alert, 10:18 p.m. I logged the call to Sloan Whitaker. I noted her denial and the time of disconnection. I was building the digital cage, piece by piece, ensuring every link was clean, time-stamped, and sterile. From this second, this was no longer a family matter. This was a crime scene. My hands remained on the keyboard. The denial was the final confirmation. The click of the lock. Investigator Whitaker was now fully engaged. The first 48 hours of an investigation are critical. A digital trail is freshest in the first few days, before automated systems overwrite logs, before a perpetrator has time for second thoughts, before they begin the methodical process of concealment. Sloane had a 2-day head start, but she did not know she was in a race. I toggled from the case file intake screen to my secure browser. My position at Phoebe grants me access to systems far beyond what a civilian can see. I was not just checking my credit score, I was pulling the raw data file from the Bureau's mainframe. The file materialized on my screen, a dense wall of text and codes. I am fluent in this language. My eyes scanned the trade lines, bypassing the familiar accounts, my mortgage, my single credit card, my closed auto loan. My FICO score was 810, clean, meticulous, disciplined. And there it was, a new entry. Lender, Seaside National Trust. Account type, unsecured personal loan. Date opened, 3 days ago. Credit limit loan. Amount, $90,000. Balance, $90,000. Status, active. The alert had been the inquiry. This was the result. The breach was complete. $90,000 had been successfully acquired using my name. My breathing remained slow, measured. This was not a personal violation. This was data point 1. I needed the application. This was the source document, the nexus of the crime. Accessing a loan application from a private bank requires a warrant, an official request that would log my name and agency, potentially tipping off internal bank auditors who might freeze the account prematurely. It was too soon for that. I needed to proceed as the victim, not the investigator. I navigated to the public-facing portal of Seaside National Trust. I clicked Forgot Password. I entered my social security number and my date of birth. The system, recognizing my identity, sent a temporary passcode to the contact information on file. A new email address, not mine. A new phone number, not mine. Sloane had been thorough enough to change the contact methods, but she had been clumsy. The application itself, the PDF she had signed, would still be linked to the account creation. I backed out and initiated a formal automated request for all account documentation as the primary account holder. Citing federal disclosure laws, the system, legally obligated to comply, processed the request. 90 seconds later, the PDF of the original e-application populated in my secure download folder. I opened the file. Name, Natalie Whitaker. Address, an apartment I had rented 8 years ago. One Sloane had co-signed for as a guarantor before I had established my own credit. She had my data saved from a decade ago. Social security number, mine. Date of birth, mine. Employer, Federal Office of Banking Integrity. The data was clean, too clean. Then, I reached the income verification section. Annual salary, $520,000. A blatant, 6-figure inflation. This was the core of the fraud. My real, government modest salary would never have qualified for an unsecured $90,000 loan. By using my high credit score but inflating the income, the application sailed through the bank's automated approval algorithm without triggering a manual review. It was a common technique used in synthetic identity fraud. I scrolled to the final page, the signature, Natalie Whitaker. It was signed with an electronic stylus, but it was not my hand. My signature is small, angular, and efficient. This was broad, looping, and flamboyant. The T crossed with an arrogant upward flick. It was Sloane's signature pretending to be mine. I immediately initiated the evidence capture protocol. I took a full-screen, high-resolution capture of the application PDF. The system automatically time-stamped the image. Tuesday, 10:42 p.m. I ran the image file through our internal cryptographic hash generator. A string of 64 characters appeared on my screen, the SHA-256 hash. This was the file's unique digital fingerprint. It was now impossible to alter the evidence without breaking the seal. I saved the hash key to the FW31-9X case file. The chain of custody had begun. Next, the signature itself. I opened a separate phobia analysis module, a proprietary tool we use to verify contested documents. I uploaded the screenshot of the forged signature. Then, I accessed my own federal employment records and pulled the last 3 internal forms I had signed. My real signature. Small, sharp, controlled. I placed the images side by side in the comparison window. I ran the recognition algorithm. The module analyzed stroke weight, curvature, pressure points, and velocity. The process took less than 5 seconds. The result flashed in red text. Probability of forgery, greater than 98%. I took a screen capture of the analysis result. I hashed the file. I uploaded it. Data point 2. I had the how. Now I needed the where. The money was the objective. I returned to the Seaside National Trust account portal. I accessed the transaction log for the new loan account. The $90,000 disbursement had posted 3 days ago. It had not remained there. Just 24 hours later, a single wire transfer was executed. Amount, $85,000. The remaining $5,000 was left sitting in the account. This was another classic move. It was buffer money, intended to make the first few minimum payments automatically, keeping the loan in good standing and delaying the delinquency notices for months. It bought the perpetrator time, but the $85,000 was the payload. I focused on the wire transfer recipient data. Recipient account, Borealis Equity, LLC. The name was meaningless, designed to sound stable and anonymous, a shell corporation. I toggled back to my Phobi terminal. I ran the name Borealis Equity, LLC through the federal and state corporations database. My heart did not beat faster. It simply beat harder. Borealis Equity, LLC. Registered in Northlake. Date of incorporation, 4 months ago. Status, active. Registered agent, Sloan Whitaker. I stared at her name. It was not just arrogance. It was laziness. She had used her own name to register the shell company that would receive the stolen funds. She was counting on the sweet little sister being too emotionally devastated, too confused, or too afraid of a family confrontation to ever look this deep. She assumed I would cry, call the bank's fraud department, and let them handle it. She never, in a million years, anticipated that I would be the one running the query. This changed the investigation from simple identity theft to a premeditated wire fraud scheme. The final connection clicked into place. Easter dinner, the bragging. The new penthouse, just a temporary lease, Riverton. A lease on a luxury penthouse in Riverton that required a significant security deposit, plus first and last month's rent, and likely a broker's fee. $85,000. The math was perfect. She had funded her new life with my credit. I needed the real-world confirmation, the social media post. I opened a clean browser, routing my connection through a non-attributable IP address based in another state. I navigated to Sloane's public social media profile. It was a curated museum of her success. Cocktails at exclusive clubs, the new SUV, the mint green handbag. I scrolled down. I did not have to scroll far. Posted. 2 days ago. This was exactly 1 day after the $85,000 wire transfer had cleared from my loan account into Borealis Equity, LLC. The photograph was of Sloane, holding a single key, smiling triumphantly. Behind her, through a massive floor-to-ceiling window, was a panoramic view of the Riverton skyline at dusk. The caption, "Just picked up the keys. Officially a Riverton girl. So excited for this next chapter. Hard work truly pays off." Hard work. I right-clicked. Save image. I took a time-stamped screen capture of the entire web page, including the post, the comments, and the URL. I hashed the files. I uploaded them to FW31-9X. I sat back. The fluorescent lights hummed. It was 11:16 p.m. In under an hour, I had the entire case. I did not pick up the phone to scream at Sloane. I did not call my parents to tell them their golden child was a federal criminal. I did not text Sloane the screenshot of her own social media post linked to the wire transfer. And most critically, I did not call Seaside National Trust to report the fraud. Calling the bank now would be a catastrophic tactical error. They would freeze the account. They would flag the transaction. They would immediately contact the listed agent for Borealis Equity LLC. They would contact Sloan. She would be alerted. She would panic. She would delete the social media post. She would dissolve the LLC. She would move the remaining $5,000. She would begin covering her tracks, destroying the pristine, unbroken digital trail she had so carelessly left for me. No, I would not give her that warning. I was in absolute control. The subject was unaware she was under observation. This was the moment of maximum investigative advantage. I minimized the browser window. I opened a new, encrypted text document inside the case file. I began to build the timeline, a simple, linear progression of facts. Event 1. Subject, Sloan Whitaker, identifies financial need based on lifestyle inflation. Event 2. Subject incorporates shell entity, Borealis Equity LLC, in preparation for fund diversion. Event 3. Subject acquires victims, Natalie Whitaker, personal identifiers. Event 4. Subject executes fraudulent application with Seaside National Trust, falsifying income and forging signature. Event 5. Loan, $90,000, approved and dispersed. Event 6. Subject transfers payload, $85,000, from fraudulent account to shell entity account. Event 7. Subject uses illicit funds to secure luxury penthouse lease. Event 8. Subject publicly boasts of acquisition on social media. Correlating the timeline. I saved the document. The conclusion was not emotional. It was operational. Motive. Lifestyle exceeding income. Means. Aggravated identity theft. Wire fraud. The trail. An irrefutable, closed-loop chain of digital evidence. I looked at the case file number on my screen. FW31-9X. My sister thought she was playing a game with her boring, safe little sister. She did not realize she had just confessed to multiple federal offenses, and that the only witness was the lead investigator. I logged out of the system. I would let her make the first minimum payment. I would let her settle in. I needed to let the evidence mature. Patience is the weapon of the disciplined. My job is not about high-speed chases or kicking down doors. It is about the meticulous, silent accumulation of facts. It is about waiting. 3 weeks passed, then 6. To the outside world, my life remained a flat line of routine. I drove my paid-off sedan to the federal building. I analyzed reports on currency structuring in the import-export market. I drank my black coffee at 0900. I left at 1730. I did nothing. But in the encrypted partition of my home computer, case file FW31-9X was growing. I did not report the fraud. I did not freeze the account. I let the $90,000 loan live. I treated it as a biologist treats a specimen in a petri dish. I was observing its life cycle. The first payment notification arrived exactly 28 days after the loan was opened. An email from Seaside National Trust, routed to the fake address Sloan had created, popped up in the account portal I was monitoring. Your payment of $325 has been successfully processed. The minimum, just enough to keep the account current, enough to ensure no late fees, no delinquency reports, no red flags that would alert the bank's internal auditors. She was following the plan. I initiated a trace protocol. I needed the payment's origin. A professional criminal would have used a VPN, a public network, or routed the payment through a series of digital wallets. Sloan did not. The payment was made from a standard banking application on a mobile device. The IP address was not masked. It was a high-capacity consumer fiber optic line. I ran the IP address against the regional carrier database. Provider, Riverton Telecom. Registered service address, 1 Riverton Plaza, the penthouse. She made the payment for the loan she took out in my name from the apartment she bought with the money. It was textbook arrogance. I logged the transaction. I logged the IP address. I logged the device fingerprint. I took a time-stamped screenshot, hashed the file, and added it to the chain of custody. I went back to work. I waited. During these 6 weeks, I studied my subject. Sloane's social media presence was a blizzard of activity. She was not just living her new life, she was performing it. There were photos of the skyline, tagged boss life. There were videos of her uncorking expensive champagne in the new kitchen, the mint green handbag always visible on the marble countertop. She was broadcasting the evidence of her crime, convinced it was proof of her success. This behavior confirmed my central theory, the arrogance axiom. Most criminals I investigate are driven by desperation or greed, and they operate in fear of being caught. But there is a different breed, the kind Sloane belonged to, the narcissist. For them, the money is secondary. The true prize is the feeling of being smarter than everyone else. They need an audience to validate their superiority. They crave the applause. This craving makes them talk. They cannot help themselves. They will, eventually, confess to the nearest microphone, just to prove how clever they were. Sloane was drowning in her own self-confidence. She had stolen $90,000 from her boring government employee sister and faced zero consequences. She believed she had won. She believed I was stupid, or weak, or both. She believed I had seen the credit inquiry, been confused, and simply let it go. While she posed for selfies, I expanded the investigation. The use of Borealis Equity LLC was clean, but it was singular. This felt too polished for a first-time offense. My hypothesis shifted. This was not her first loan. This was just the first one using me. I set up a series of quiet, passive alerts within the Phoebe mainframe. They were not tied to FW31-9X. They were broad. Any new corporate filings in Northlake or contiguous states linked to the Whitaker name. Any application for an employer identification number from known associates of Sloane's. Any credit inquiry linked to my parents' address, my old addresses, or the addresses of Sloane's previous 2 roommates. I was searching for a pattern. Specifically, I was looking for transfers just under the $50,000 mark. White-collar criminals know that $50,000 is often a key threshold for enhanced internal bank scrutiny. They prefer to stack smaller, less conspicuous amounts. I began to draw a map. It was no longer a simple line. It was a web. At the center, Sloane, radiating out from her. Borealis Equity LLC, the primary shell. Connected to that, the $90,000 loan from Seaside National Trust, which I now labeled Identity, N, Whitaker, connected to the loan. The Riverton penthouse, connected to the penthouse. The social media posts. The new SUV. The luxury goods. I left a blank box connected to Sloane. It was labeled Identity, Unknown Victim 2, Identity, Unknown Victim 3. I suspected she had a collection. There was another missing piece, the application itself. The inflated income of $520,000. That was not a random number. It was specific, high enough to guarantee approval, but not so high as to be patently absurd in an automated system. She had help. I added another box to the map, connected to Sloane with a dotted line. Unknown facilitator. Shady broker? She had found someone in the ecosystem of manufacturing images, a credit broker, a fixer, who knew how to package these fraudulent applications. This was organized. The second payment arrived, 31 days after the first. Amount, $325. IP address, identical. Device, identical. She was in a routine. She was comfortable. The trap was holding. During this entire time, I had one paramount, overriding objective. I could not, under any circumstances, compromise the case file. This was the line I walked every day. I was the victim. I was also the primary investigator. This was a catastrophic conflict of interest. If I used my federal credentials to actively pursue the case, if I issued a subpoena, if I confronted her, a halfway decent defense attorney would move to have all the evidence I collected thrown out. They would paint it as a vindictive sister using the power of the federal government to settle a family spat. The file had to be immaculate. It had to be sterile. Every piece of evidence had to be collected passively, either as the civilian victim, the loan application, or through observation of public data, the social media posts. I was not building a case to win in court. I was building a case that was undeniable. A simple, logical progression of facts. So clean and so absolute that no emotional argument could touch it. I was building it to hand it off. I could not move. I had to wait for Sloane to make the final, critical error. I had to wait for the arrogance axiom to play out. I needed her to brag. The opportunity arrived on a Thursday evening, 6.5 weeks after the loan was opened. My phone rang. It was my mother, Marla. "Natalie, honey, I feel like I have not seen you in ages," she said. Her voice was light, laced with that familiar, passive-aggressive guilt. "I have been busy at the office." "Mom," I said. My voice was neutral. "Always busy." "Well, you are not too busy for your family. We are having a dinner on Friday, just the 4 of us. Your sister is coming." I paused. The air in my apartment suddenly felt very still. "Sloane is coming?" "Yes. She wants to tell us all about her new life. She sounds so happy. You will be here, won't you? Natalie, 7 o'clock. Do not be late." The call clicked off. This was it, the ideal stage. Sloane, triumphant, flush with cash she did not earn. My parents, her willing and adoring audience, and me, the safe sister, the one she needed to feel superior to. She would not be able to resist. She would perform. I walked to my closet. Behind my unremarkable clothes, I kept a small, locked metal box. It contained my specialist equipment. I bypassed the encrypted drives and the listening devices. I took out a simple digital audio recorder. It was the size of a car key fob, high fidelity, with an 8-hour battery life. I plugged it in to charge. I sat at my desk and pulled up the Northlake State Legal Code. I double-checked the statute on surveillance, Title 4, Section 819, Interception of Communications. The law was clear. Northlake was a one-party consent state. As long as I was a participant in the conversation, the recording was perfectly legal. It was admissible. I checked the charge on the recorder. It was full. I slipped it into the small, hidden pocket inside my jacket. The digital trap had been set for 6 weeks. The physical trap would be set on Friday. I arrived at 7 o'clock precisely. The front door was unlocked, as it always was. The house in Westford smelled of my mother's expensive roast beef and the overpowering floral scent of the centerpiece on the dining room table. It was the smell of performance. The dining room was brightly lit. My mother, Marla, was fussing over the silverware, already polished to a painful gleam. My father, Gordon, was pouring a generous glass of red wine for Sloane, who was holding court by the fireplace. Sloane was the center of gravity in the room. She was luminous. She wore a silk dress the color of champagne, her hair professionally blown out. She was mid-story, her laughter bright and tinkling, the sound of a woman who had never known a single consequence. "Natalie, you're here," my mother said, her voice tight with relief. She kissed the air near my cheek. "We were just about to sit. Put your coat away." I slipped my jacket off, in the hidden inside pocket. My finger found the small, solid rectangle of the digital recorder. I had pressed the record button in the car. As I sat in the driveway, it was already active. I walked to the table. I placed my personal cell phone face down on the white tablecloth, just to the left of my assigned plate. The recorder was not in the phone. It was in my jacket pocket, which I draped over the back of my chair. The high-fidelity microphone was designed to pick up clear audio from across a room. We sat. My father carved the roast. The conversation, as it always was a monologue delivered by Sloane, punctuated by my parents' gasps of admiration. She spoke of Riverton. She spoke of the criminal cost of custom window treatments. She spoke of the galas she was attending, the exhausting demands of her high-profile clients. My parents listened with rapt, devotional attention. They saw success. I saw a curated narrative, funded by a $90,000 line of credit secured by my 810 FICO score. Sloane eventually turned her bright, sharp smile on me. "And you, Natalie?" How are things in the land of gray cubicles? Still filing reports on whatever it is you do? My mother tittered nervously. Sloan, be nice. I am being nice, Sloan said, feigning innocence. Her eyes locked on me. I just worry about her. All that work. No fun. God, it sounds so dull. I think I would just die. This was the script. This was the overture. She had to establish my inferiority before she could perform her triumph. My job is fine. Sloan, I said, my voice flat. I cut a piece of roast beef. It's predictable. Exactly, she laughed, turning back to my father as if I had proven her point. Predictable, safe, boring, the perfect victim. She took another large sip of wine. Her eyes were glittering. The arrogance was rolling off her in waves. She was high on her own success, on the stolen money, on the flawless execution of her plan. She could not just have the victory, she had to announce it. The arrogance axiom was playing out in real time. She picked up her fork and tapped it, a sharp ting, 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 against the side of her crystal wine glass. The sound cut through my father's quiet chewing. Everyone, she said, her voice theatrical. Attention, I have a story. My father put his fork down, his face arranged in an expression of paternal indulgence. What is it, sweetheart? My mother leaned forward, her hands clasped, smiling eagerly. What is it, honey? Sloan looked directly at me. Her smile was wide, conspiratorial, and dripping with contempt. It's actually a really funny story. You'll love this. Dad, you know how I got the penthouse? She paused for the perfect dramatic beat. I used Natalie's credit. The room went absolutely silent. The only sound was the hum of the refrigerator from the kitchen. My father's smile froze. His face went pale. Sloan, he started, his voice a low, confused rumble. What are you talking about? My mother let out a small, strangled laugh. Sloan, that's not funny. Tell us you're joking. That's a terrible joke. Oh, relax, Sloan scoffed, turning her palms up, the picture of casual confidence. It's not a joke, but it's not a big deal, either. I just borrowed it, she continued, waving her hand dismissively, as if it were a cup of sugar. I needed a little boost for the deposit, and my credit is all tied up in investments. You know how it is. So I just used her information. A $90,000 loan. Poof, approved in an instant. She never looked away from me. She held my gaze, her chin high. She was waiting. This was the moment she had engineered. She was waiting for the tears. She was waiting for the outraged cry of, "How could you?" She was waiting for me to break down, to run to our parents, to prove, once and for all, that I was the weak, hysterical, safe one, and she was the powerful one who took what she wanted. I did not break eye contact. I did not raise my voice. I finished chewing the piece of roast beef. I swallowed. I placed my knife and fork precisely on my plate, parallel to each other. I looked at her. The $90,000, I said, my voice as calm as if I were asking for the salt. Did you use that for the deposit on the Riverton penthouse? The color drained from Sloane's face. Her smile faltered. This was not in her script. I had not cried. I had stated a fact. I had connected her act to her prize. The smug superiority in her eyes flickered, replaced by a flash of genuine, animal panic. She had expected hysteria. She was met with data. She recovered quickly, forcing a laugh that sounded like breaking glass. Her panic vanished under a wave of her old, familiar anger. Yes, of course. So what? Who cares what I used it for? Nat? It's just family. We help each other. It's not a big deal. It is a big deal. Sloan, I said. I was not arguing. I was informing. My tone was the one I used in official briefings. Falsifying income on a loan application and using another person's identity to secure funds is not helping family. It is aggravated identity theft. It is bank fraud. It is a federal felony. Federal felony? My father choked out, his eyes wide, looking back and forth between us. Natalie, what are you saying? Sloane slammed her wine glass on the table. Wine sloshed onto the white tablecloth. A dark red stain. "Oh, stop it," she spat at me. "Stop with your federal nonsense. You're just jealous. You're jealous of the penthouse. You're jealous of my life. And you're trying to ruin my moment." She stood up, leaning over the table, her face contorted with rage. "You're not going to do anything. You know why? Because you're weak. You always have been. You'll go back to your boring little cubicle, and you won't do a thing. You never do." The table was silent. My mother looked like she was about to be sick. My father was rigid, staring at Sloane. I did not respond. The arrogance had delivered. The confession was on tape. The motive, I needed a boost for the deposit, was on tape. The admission of the act, I used her credit, a $90,000 loan, was on tape. The subsequent threat, "You won't do anything," was on tape. The file was complete. I calmly folded my napkin and placed it on the table. I stood up. I did not look at my parents. I looked only at my sister. Her chest was heaving, her eyes bright with rage and a new, unfamiliar fear. "Natalie, sit down," my father commanded, his voice strained. "We are not finished." "Yes, we are," I said, my voice quiet. I turned and walked out of the dining room. I retrieved my jacket from the back of the chair, my fingers closing around the recorder. "Natalie!" my father yelled. I could hear my mother start to cry, a high, thin sound. "That's right, run away!" Sloane screamed from the dining room. "Run away like you always do!" I stepped out into the cool night air. The front door clicked shut behind me. I walked to my car, sat in the driver's seat, and took the recorder out of my pocket. I pressed the stop button. The digital file was saved. Time-stamped. Secure. The entire beautifully articulated confession was now just another piece of evidence in case file FW31-9X. It was perfect. I was in the office at 0700 on Saturday morning. The weekend quiet of the federal building has a different texture from the weekday hum. It is absolute. My footsteps echoed on the polished composite flooring. The air was cold, the fluorescent lights buzzing over empty desks. I was not there to investigate. I was there to recuse. My first act was to log into the internal FOBI ethics portal. I filled out Form 882B, Notification of Conflict of Interest, Case File, FW31-9X. Subject, Sloane Whitaker, Relationship to Investigator, Biological Sister. Nature of Conflict. Investigator, N. Whitaker, is the primary victim and material witness in the listed case. I digitally signed the form. The system timestamped it. Saturday, 07:10 a.m. I printed a hard copy for my records and another for my supervisor. This was the firewall. From this moment, my direct access to the case file I had built was severed. My investigator credentials were now locked out from that specific directory. My second act was to finalize the package, overnight. My home system had finished processing the audio from the dinner. The 8-megabyte file was clean, capturing every word, every clink of the wine glass, every shift in tone. I ran the file through the SHA-256 hash generator. I copied the resulting 64-character string. I opened a new, master-level encrypted container. Into this container, I placed every piece of evidence, every link in the chain, in chronological order. 1. The initial credit inquiry alert, time-stamped. 2. The full downloaded PDF of the fraudulent loan application from Seaside National Trust. 3. The hashed screenshot of the 98% probability forgery analysis. 4. The wire transfer confirmations, showing $90,000 disbursed and $85,000 moved to Borealis Equity LLC. 5. The North Lake State Incorporation records for Borealis Equity LLC, listing Sloane Whitaker as the registered agent. 6. The hashed screenshots of Sloane's social media posts, time-stamped to match the day after the wire transfer. 7. The IP logs and device fingerprints from the first and second minimum payments, originating from the Riverton penthouse. 8. the full, hashed audio file from the family dinner, along with its metadata. 9. A simple text document containing the timeline I had built, listing only the objective facts and their corresponding evidence file. 10. A copy of my signed conflict of interest form. The container was sealed, encrypted, and uploaded to the secure Phobie transfer server. It was no longer my file. It was a sterile package, ready for transfer. It told a perfect, irrefutable story without a single emotional adjective. At 0800, I was in the office of Deputy Director Vera Maddox. Maddox is a woman who lives by process. She is ex-Treasury, sharp, and has zero tolerance for ambiguity. She was already at her desk, drinking black coffee from a plain white mug. She had seen my meeting request and my attached recusal form. She did not ask about my family. She did not ask how I was feeling. "Investigator Whitaker," she said, her eyes on her monitor. "I have read your form. Walk me through the package." I did. I spoke for 3 minutes, using the same flat tone I used at the dinner table. I recited the timeline, the data points, and the evidence log. I concluded by giving her the access key to the encrypted container. She typed, her fingers moving quickly. She opened the container. Her eyes scanned the contents. She clicked on the audio file, listened to a 30-second segment, then clicked off. She read my timeline. She cross-referenced the file hashes. She was silent for a full minute. I stood, hands loosely clasped behind my back. Finally, she nodded. A short, sharp motion. "This is clean," she said. It was the highest compliment she could pay. "You followed protocol. The recusal is accepted. The chain of custody is intact." She typed another command. "I am transferring the package to the Joint Task Force. It will be assigned an assistant U.S. attorney by noon today. It will also be routed to the Treasury's Financial Crimes Division for the Shell Corporation and broker analysis." "Thank you, Director," I said. "This is sufficient to prosecute. Whitaker," she said, looking at me for the first time. Her eyes were not sympathetic, but they were clear. "This office will handle the formal victim notification and liaison with Seaside National. You are now officially off the case. Go back to your desk. You have the quarterly currency structuring reports due on Monday." "Yes, Director." I turned and walked out. The handoff was complete. I went back to my desk. I pulled up the quarterly reports. I began analyzing spreadsheets detailing suspicious cash deposits at regional banks. The work was complex and required my full attention. I gave it to anyone walking by. I was just a government employee working on a Saturday. The surface of my life remained placid, calm as glass, but beneath the surface, the machine was beginning to move, and the pressure was building. The first call came at 2:45 p.m. on my personal cell. My father. "Natalie," he said. His voice was not angry. It was thin, frayed with a panic I had never heard before. "Natalie, 2 men just left the house. They were federal investigators." I remained silent. I kept typing data into my spreadsheet with my other hand. "They had papers. Nat, they asked about Sloan. They asked about the dinner, about the loan. Your mother is a wreck. She won't stop crying." "I cannot talk about this, Dad," I said. My voice was quiet. "What do you mean? You cannot talk about it. This is your family. You did this. You have to call them off. You have to tell them it was a misunderstanding, a family spat. You have to fix this." "It is out of my hands," I said. "What does that mean? What does out of my hands mean? You work for them. You are one of them. Tell them to stop. Tell them Sloan will pay the money back. We will pay it back. We will pay you. Just make it stop. I have to go. Dad, Natalie, do not you hang up on me. Do not you do this to your sister. We are your family." I ended the call. I placed the phone face down on my desk. I continued working on the currency report. 2 minutes later, a text message notification lit up the screen. It was from Sloan. "You backstabbing little bitch. You think you are so smart with your stupid government job. You are ruining this family. I took a screenshot. Another text came immediately. You better call off your dogs. You have no idea what you just started. I will end you. I will tell everyone what you are. I will ruin you. This was no longer a personal insult. This was a direct threat against a federal witness. Witness tampering. A new, separate felony. I did not reply. I did not block her number. I opened a new, secure email. I addressed it to the AUSA who had just been assigned the case. I had seen the notification pop up on the internal docket. Subject: FW31-9X. Witness communication. Body: forwarding the attached screenshots for your records. Received at 14:58 and 14:59 p.m. Please advise if further contact is attempted. Attachment: screenshots. PNG. I sent the email. I deleted it from my sent items. I went back to my spreadsheet. I was no longer an investigator. I was a witness, following instructions. My personal phone began to ring again. My mother. I silenced the call. It rang again. My father. I silenced it. Text from Mom. Your sister is just scared. Please call me. We can fix this. She is your sister. I silenced all notifications from my family. The federal machine, once engaged, is impersonal and relentless. It does not care about family dinners or tears. It only cares about data. And the data I had provided was perfect. On Monday morning, the official warrants were served. A team, not from Phoebe, but from the Treasury, served Seaside National Trust. They did not just get the application I had already pulled. They got the server logs, the internal bank communications, and the full transaction history for the fake account. Another warrant hit the service provider for Borealis Equity LLC. Another hit Riverton Telecom, requesting the full subscriber data and IP logs for the penthouse. The digital net was closing. At noon, I received a standard, automated update as the listed victim on the case. It was a single line from the AUSA's office. Initial analysis of seized data from facilitator shows markers of packaged credit profiles. Investigation is expanding. My hypothesis was correct. The credit broker, Sloan, was not just a thief. She was a client. She had bought a package to manufacture her new life. The task force was no longer just investigating Sloan. They were rolling up her entire supply chain. I watched the update, and I felt nothing but the quiet satisfaction of a correct analysis. I deleted the update notification. I abided by the golden rule. You do not touch a case you have transferred. You do not ask about it. You do not offer opinions. You let the process work. My job was done. I was just another analyst, working on a quarterly report, while the silent, massive engine of federal justice began, piece by piece, to dismantle my sister's life. I am a creature of process. My life, from the outside, remained a testament to the mundane. I arrived at the office. I processed my reports. I left. I was a model of federal efficiency. I did my job. And, as the official victim in an active case, I received automated, sterile updates from the Assistant U.S. Attorney's Office. I was not an investigator. I was a line item, a recipient of courtesy notifications. I would read them, absorb the data, and then securely delete the notification. The first major update arrived 7 days after the handoff. It was not a summary. It was a copy of the executed search warrant and the preliminary inventory log from the Riverton penthouse. The Joint Task Force had not been subtle. They had gone in hard. They had seized everything. The inventory log was 12 pages long. It detailed the contents of her closets, receipts for designer handbags, shoes, and clothing, totaling tens of thousands of dollars, all dated within the last 6 weeks. They had found the mint green handbag I remembered from Easter. It was now evidence tag number 415. But the closets were just the dressing. The real evidence was deeper. Behind a framed, abstract painting in her living room, they had found a wall safe. Inside, it held a small amount of cash, some jewelry, and 3 encrypted hardware wallets. On her desk, they had seized her laptop and 2 external hard drives. This was the first twist. Sloan was not just lazy. As I had first assumed, she was arrogant, but she was also paranoid. She knew, on some level, that what she was doing was illicit, and she had taken steps to compartmentalize the data. It did not matter. The task force's digital forensics unit is not stopped by commercial encryption. They had the drives. The second update arrived 48 hours later. It was the preliminary forensic report from those drives. I read the file, and the true scope of my sister's ambition became clear. My $90,000 loan was not the main event. It was simply her latest, and most arrogant, acquisition. They had found a folder. It contained scanned, high-resolution copies of driver's licenses, social security cards, and birth certificates. There were 7 other identities. I scanned the names. I recognized 2 of them. A former colleague of hers from her first PR job, a woman who had been a bridesmaid in her college friend's wedding. The others were just names. People she had met, collected, and cataloged. They were not children. They were not the elderly. They were peers. People who, like me, had good, clean credit. People who would be slow to notice a small inquiry, who might mistake a new loan for a computer glitch. This was her collection. The third update was the financial summary from the Treasury analyst assigned to the case. It was a masterwork of data correlation. They had cross-referenced the 7 new identities with the credit bureaus. The pattern was instantly clear. Just as I had suspected, Sloan never took out another massive loan like mine. That had been a mistake, a fit of hubris. Her methodology was to stack. For victim 2, a $20,000 loan from a small online lender. For victim 3, $35,000 from a regional credit union. For victim 4, $48,000, just under the $50,000 threshold. One by one. She had built her empire of debt. Each loan was small enough to fly under the radar, but stacked together, the total was staggering. The analyst's report concluded, preliminary total from 8 identified victims, including N. Whitaker, exceeds $400,000. This was not a simple identity theft case anymore. This was a serial fraud operation. The twists kept coming. The forensics team, digging deeper into the encrypted hard drive, found an email cache. In it was a draft, saved but never sent, to a distant cousin of ours who lived in the Caribbean. The subject line was, business opportunity. The email was clumsy, asking the cousin about the requirements to open a non-resident bank account in Crescent Cay, a fictional island nation known to us as a notorious tax haven. Sloan was looking for an exit. She was planning to move the money offshore, out of the reach of U.S. jurisdiction. This added a new charge, intent to launder money. Then, the final, devastating piece of evidence emerged. The forensics team had recovered a file from the unallocated space on her laptop's main drive, a file she had deleted, thinking it was gone forever. It was a simple spreadsheet. The file name was Staircase XLSX. I read the description of the file in the AUSA's update. It was her entire business plan. It was a ledger. Column A listed the victim's name. Column B, the loan amount. Column C, the bank. Column D, the monthly minimum payment. Column E, the date the payment was due. She had built a meticulous schedule for living. She was using the inflow from new loans to pay the minimums on the old loans. A classic pyramid scheme of debt. Her entire life, the penthouse, the SUV, the champagne, the boss life, was funded by this rotating, ever-growing mountain of fraud. The staircase was her plan to climb up, one stolen dollar at a time. The case was no longer just about Sloan. It was about the ecosystem she had used. The task force had traced the origins of Borealis Equity LLC. It was not just a shell company to receive my $85,000. It was her investment fund. She had used it to sell an image. The Treasury analyst found evidence she had convinced 2 other people to invest in her fund, promising high returns. She was using the stolen loan money to pay them small dividends, luring them in for a larger investment. She had evolved from identity thief to full-blown Ponzi scheme operator. The AUSA's office was now correlating everything. They took her social media feed, the one I had first reviewed, and laid it over the staircase spreadsheet. Post. Finally got my new wheels. Hard work. Dated 2 days after a $40,000 loan from Victim 5 was disbursed. Post. Riverton Skyline. Moving on up. Dated 1 day after my $85,000 hit her Shell account. Every boast, every hashtag, every performance of her success was now a time-stamped exhibit, a direct link to a specific act of fraud. The consequences were immediate. The machine was not just gathering data, it was acting. The AUSA filed for, and was granted, immediate asset seizure. The new luxury SUV was taken from the penthouse garage. Her bank accounts, all of them, including Borealis equity, were frozen solid. The jewelry they found in the safe was seized. The penthouse itself, paid for with the proceeds of a crime, was sealed. I sat at my desk, the federal building humming around me. I received another update. It was a single image, a screenshot from the lead Treasury investigator's case mapping software. It was a web. In the center was a single node. Sloan Whitaker. Radiating out from her were 8 lines, 8 victims, including me. Branching from those were the banks. Branching from her were the Shell accounts. Branching from the Shells was the Crescent K email. Branching from her was the credit broker, who was now listed as a person of interest. She was not just a part of the map. She was the map. At 4:10 p.m., a final notification for the day appeared. From Deputy Director Vera Maddox to all personnel, Joint Task Force FW31-9X, subject, case status. Update, body. The Assistant U.S. Attorney has reviewed the completed evidence package and has formally requested a warrant for the arrest of the subject, Sloan Whitaker, on multiple counts including bank fraud, wire fraud, aggravated identity theft, and money laundering. I have signed the notification of completed pre-prosecution. Be prepared for execution upon the judge's signature. The message was clinical. It was the final turn of the key. I closed the notification. I deleted it. I turned back to my report on currency structuring. My phone was silent. My parents had stopped calling. My sister had stopped texting. There was nothing left to say. I finished my report, my typing steady, the rhythm unbroken. My strongest weapon had always been my discipline, my silence. I had given the facts a voice, and now, the facts were speaking for me. It was 2 days after the arrest warrant had been executed. Sloan was in federal holding. The news had reported that bail had been denied, citing the multiple identities, the offshore email, and the direct threats against a witness. The machine was running exactly as designed. The silence from my parents, once a tool of passive aggression, had become a wall of absolute, terrified quiet. Then, at 8 o'clock on a Tuesday night, the knock came. It was not a polite, neighborly knock. It was a heavy, rhythmic banging on the door of my apartment, a sound of pure desperation. I opened it. My apartment is small, efficient, and painted in 2 shades of gray. The kitchen, visible from the entrance, is all stainless steel and white quartz. It is a room where everything has a purpose. My parents stood in the hallway, illuminated by the harsh fluorescent light. They looked ruined. My father, Gordon, who had always been so proud of his posture, was stooped, his face gray and unshaven. My mother, Marla, was a ghost in a trench coat. Her eyes were red and swollen, her hair matted on one side, and she clutched a wad of damp tissues in her fist. "We need to come in, Natalie," my father said. His voice was a gravelly command. I did not speak. I simply stepped aside. They walked past me, stopping in the center of my small living room, looking displaced, as if my clean, orderly furniture was hostile to them. "They won't let her out," my mother whispered, the words ripped from her throat. "She is in a cell. They said, they called her a flight risk. Our Sloan, a flight risk. Natalie, she does not even like to fly." My father turned to face me. His eyes were not sad. They were burning with a desperate, unfocused anger. "You did this," he said, his voice low and shaking. "Whatever game you are playing, it is over. You have to stop this. You have to stop it now. I stood by my kitchen counter, the border between my living room and my workspace. I did not move toward them. I rested my hands lightly on the cold quartz. My voice, when it came, was flat. I did not start this. He stared at me, his brow furrowed, as if I were speaking a foreign language. I am ending it. Ending it? My father's voice cracked, rising in volume. Ending what? Your family? Is that what they taught you at that cold government building? How to destroy your own blood? We raised you. I worked 60-hour weeks for 30 years to give you both. Everything. I put you through college so you could get that safe job. And this is how you repay us? You put your own sister in a cage? Gordon, please, your voice. My mother wept, collapsing onto my sofa. She looked up at me, her face pleading. Natalie, honey, please, I am begging you. She is your sister. She made a mistake. It was just money. It is just numbers on a screen. You cannot let them do this to her. Call your boss. Call someone. Tell them it was a misunderstanding. Tell them. A misunderstanding? I interrupted. My voice was sharp, just for a moment, before I recalibrated, pulling it back to the flat, procedural tone of a briefing. Mom, it was not a misunderstanding. It was bank fraud. It was wire fraud. And it was aggravated identity theft. Plural. The case file identified 8 victims. 8? My father looked genuinely confused. What? I thought it was just you. The $90,000. She was bragging. She was drunk at dinner. They did not know. They were still operating on the outdated data from that Friday night. They were still trying to manage a family spat, and they had brought their emotional leverage to a federal jurisdiction. I need to explain the procedural reality to you, I said. I turned, opened a cabinet, and took down 3 glass tumblers. This is no longer a family matter. It has not been for weeks. I filled 1 glass with water from the tap. The morning after that dinner, I continued, I filed Form 882B with the FBI Ethics Office. It is a mandatory notification of conflict of interest. I formally recused myself from the investigation. I am legally and ethically barred from influencing this case. My access to the file is locked. I am a witness, nothing more. I do not understand that federal nonsense, my father snapped, waving his hand impatiently. You are her sister. You are the main victim. You can go down there and tell them you want to drop the charges. That is not how it works, I said calmly, placing the glass of water on the counter. I, as a civilian victim, cannot drop the charges. The charges were filed by the Office of the Assistant United States Attorney, based on a completed evidence package provided by the Department of the Treasury and the Federal Office of Banking Integrity. It is not my case to drop. It is the federal government's case against Sloan Whitaker. They stared at me. The finality of those words, the federal government's case, hung in the sterile air of my kitchen. My mother's sobs quieted into small, hopeless gasps. But why? She whispered, looking at her hands. Why would they? It was just you. It was a stupid, arrogant mistake. But it was not just me, I said. I walked to the small, obsessively organized desk in the corner of the room. I had been waiting for this. As a confirmed victim, the AUSA's office had sent me the unsealed victim list for my records, in preparation for the restitution phase. I had printed a copy. I picked up the single sheet of paper. I walked back to the kitchen. My father was watching my every move. His eyes narrowed, searching for the daughter he thought he knew. The task force forensic team recovered her encrypted hard drives from the penthouse wall safe, I said. They found her collection. She had 7 other victims. My father shook his head, a look of disgust on his face. Other people, that is her business. This is about family. It is, I agreed. I held out the sheet of paper. He did not take it. I placed it on the counter, next to my mother, who had risen from the sofa to stand beside her husband. You should read the list. My father picked it up. His hands were unsteady. He read the first name. Natalie Whitaker, He nodded grimly. We know. Keep reading, I said. He scanned the other names. A man he did not know, a woman, another, and then he stopped. His breathing hitched. He looked at the fifth name on the list, Gordon Whitaker. He looked at the sixth, Marla Whitaker. My mother's hand flew to her mouth, stifling a small, sharp cry. My father's face, already gray, went completely ashen. He looked up from the paper, his eyes hollow, his anger completely extinguished, replaced by a profound and chilling confusion. This is a mistake, he stammered. This is wrong. We never, she would not. She did, I said. My voice was not triumphant. It was a statement of fact. She used your social security numbers and forged your signatures to apply for 2 high-limit credit cards. She used them as proof of funds to secure the lease on the penthouse, listing you as co-guarantors without your knowledge. The total line of credit she opened in your names was $40,000. She was paying the minimums from her other fraudulent accounts. You were part of the staircase spreadsheet. The revelation landed. It was not a sound. It was the absolute crushing absence of sound. My father staggered back, gripping the counter. My mother just stared at the paper, her tears finally, completely dry. She looked stunned, as if she had been struck. The fight was gone. The emotional blackmail was gone. The performance of parental rage was gone. There was only the cold, sharp shock of betrayal. They had come to my apartment to save the predator, only to find out, definitively, that they were the prey. This was the moment, the part where the script says I should rush forward, wrap them in my arms, and say, "It's okay. We'll get through this. We are a family." I did not move. I turned back to my desk. I picked up a different stack of papers. These were not from the AUSA. They were public-facing forms from the FTC and the credit bureaus. I brought them back and placed them neatly on the counter. "You are victims," I said, my voice clinical, professional. "You need to act like it. This is the contact information for the 3 major credit bureaus: Equifax, Experian, TransUnion. You need to call them immediately, tonight, and place a fraud alert on your files. This," I said, tapping the first form, "is the Federal Trade Commission Identity Theft Affidavit. You will need to fill this out, one for each of you, to dispute the fraudulent accounts and begin repairing your credit. And this," I tapped the last sheet, "is the information on how to institute a permanent credit freeze. I highly recommend you do it before morning." My father looked at the forms. He looked at the glass of water. He looked at me. And I saw it. I saw, for the first time in my 33 years, my father truly see me. He was not seeing his safe daughter. He was not seeing the boring one. He saw a stranger, an expert in a field he could not comprehend, who had just handed him administrative homework in the middle of his life's worst crisis. He saw, finally, that my silence, the silence he and my mother had always mistaken for weakness, was discipline. It was the armor they had forced me to build, and it was now impenetrable. "Natalie," my mother said, her voice a reedy whisper. She did not look at me. She was looking at the clean white grout between my kitchen tiles. "Your sister. What happens?" "Sloane is no longer my concern," I said. "She is a case file. My only concern now is ensuring the other 7 victims, including you, are made whole. That process starts with these forms." I kept my distance. The emotional chasm between us was now a physical space in my kitchen. Family had receded. Principle had taken its place. I picked up the glass of water I had poured earlier and pushed it toward my father. His hand was still shaking. I took another glass, filled it, and pushed it toward my mother. They did not drink. They just stared at the paperwork. "When the numbers are right," I said, my voice quiet, almost to myself, "the emotions will find their own place." My father finally looked up, his eyes meeting mine. He nodded once, a tiny, jerky, broken movement. He picked up the stack of forms. My mother, moving like an automaton, picked up hers. They did not say thank you. They did not say they were sorry. They did not say goodbye. They turned, and they walked out of my apartment. I closed the door behind them. I heard the deadbolt click, a solid, final sound. I turned back to my kitchen. It was immaculate, orderly. The 2 untouched glasses of water were sweating on the counter. The only evidence they had ever been there. The lab was clean again. I sat in the 3rd row of the federal courtroom. It was a sterile, wood-paneled room that smelled of old carpet and floor wax. My presence was not required, but I was the victim, and I was a witness. I was here to see the process through. Sloan was brought in. She was not the luminous, laughing woman from my parents' dining room. She was wearing an ill-fitting gray pantsuit, her hair pulled back in a severe, joyless ponytail. Her skin was pale. She looked thin, brittle, and consumed by a terror so profound it seemed to have hollowed her out. She kept her eyes fixed on her attorney, a man whose face was set in a mask of professional pessimism. The trial was condensed. The evidence was not circumstantial. It was digital, absolute, and sequential. Sloan's attorney had attempted to have her released on bail weeks ago. The motion had been denied. The AUSA, a sharp man named D'Angelo, had presented the court with the email to Crescent K and the threatening texts to me. The judge had deemed her both a significant flight risk and a danger to the investigation. She had been in federal holding ever since. My parents were not in the courtroom. After I had given them the forms, they had vanished. They had not returned my calls. They had not come to the courthouse. They could not bear to see the star fall, and they could not bear to face the daughter who had pointed the telescope. I was called to the stand first. My testimony was brief, lasting less than 15 minutes. I wore my work uniform, a simple, dark blue suit. I did not look at Sloan. I looked at Ausa D'Angelo. Please state your name and occupation for the court. Natalie Whitaker. I am a senior investigator for the Federal Office of Banking Integrity. A murmur went through the jury box. Sloan's attorney immediately objected. Your Honor, the witness's occupation is prejudicial to the defendant. The judge looked at him, unimpressed. It is also her job, counselor. It speaks to her credibility as a witness. Overruled. D'Angelo continued. Ms. Whitaker, are you familiar with the defendant, Sloan Whitaker? Yes, she is my sister. On or around 3 months ago, did you apply for an unsecured personal loan in the amount of $90,000 from Seaside National Trust? No, I did not. Is this your signature on the electronic application, marked as Exhibit A? No, it is not. Did you at any time give the defendant permission to use your name, your credit, or your personal identifying information to secure this loan? No, I did not. D'Angelo had no further questions. The defense attorney stood. He tried to generate the narrative I had predicted. Ms. Whitaker, you and your sister, you have had a difficult relationship, correct? Objection, D'Angelo said, his voice bored. Relevance. Sustained, the judge said. Isn't it true, Ms. Whitaker, that you have always been jealous of your sister's success, her lifestyle? Objection. Sustained. Counselor, I am warning you. Your client is on trial for bank fraud, not sibling rivalry. Do you have a question relevant to the evidence, or are you just wasting the court's time? The attorney deflated. No further questions, Your Honor. I was excused. I walked from the witness stand, my footsteps silent on the carpet. I did not look at the defense table. I returned to my seat in the 3rd row. I sat, hands clasped, and I watched the case I had built be unveiled. It was, as Maddox had said, clean. D'Angelo was a master of narrative. He did not just present facts. He slammed them down, one after another, building a prison of irrefutable data. First, the core of the fraud. Exhibit A, the fraudulent loan application. Exhibit B, my real signature from my FOBI employment file, displayed next to the looping, arrogant forgery. A FOBI forensics expert testified, confirming the forgery probability was in excess of 98%. Exhibit C, the wire transfer, $90,000 from Seaside National Trust. Exhibit D. The second wire transfer. 24 hours later, $85,000 to Borealis Equity, LLC. Exhibit E. The Northlake Incorporation documents for Borealis Equity, registered agent, Sloan Whitaker. Exhibit F. The social media post, Sloan, in the penthouse, holding the key. Caption: Hard work truly pays off. The jury, a collection of normal people, was visibly connecting the dots. It was simple, clean, and damning. Sloane's attorney just sat there, shuffling papers. Then came the first surprise, the escalation. The defense will argue this was a one-time lapse in judgment, D'Angelo said, pacing in front of the jury box. They will try to call this a family matter, a simple act of borrowing. We are here to show you this was not a lapse. It was a business model. He signaled for Exhibit G. The courtroom monitors lit up with the spreadsheet. Staircase, XLSX. This file, D'Angelo explained, was recovered from the defendant's encrypted hard drive. It is her plan, a plan stretching back 18 months. He zoomed in. The jury could see the columns: victim, amount, bank, min, PMAT, due date, 8 victims, including her own parents, a rotating cycle of debt, funding a lifestyle she did not earn, a total fraud value exceeding $400,000. This was not a mistake. This was a continuing financial crime enterprise. Sloane sank lower in her chair. Then, the second surprise, the intent. The defense will argue she intended to pay it all back, D'Angelo continued, that this was just a temporary solution. Let's look at Exhibit H. The email draft to Crescent K appeared on the screen. This is an email from the defendant, seeking to open offshore accounts in a known tax haven. This is not the action of someone intending to pay back a loan. This is the action of a launderer. This is someone planning an exit. He was not done. And what happens when her plan is discovered? When her sister, the primary victim, fails to play along? Exhibit I. The text messages flashed on the screen. You backstabbing little bitch. You better call off your dogs. I will end you. I will ruin you. This, D'Angelo said, his voice dropping, is obstruction of justice. And then, the final, crushing blow. The third surprise. Exhibit J. The defense, D'Angelo said, turning to look directly at Sloane, will argue this is all circumstantial, that we cannot know what she was thinking, that we cannot prove her intent. Why? He asked the jury. Should we guess at her intent? When she confessed? Ladies and gentlemen, you are about to hear the defendant, in her own words. He signaled the technician. The courtroom speakers crackled to life. The silence was absolute. First, my father's voice, warm and indulgent. What is it, sweetheart? Then Sloane's voice, bright, arrogant, chillingly clear. It's actually a really funny story. You'll love this. Dad, I used Natalie's credit. My mother's nervous laugh echoed in the courtroom. Sloane's voice. I just borrowed it. A $90,000 loan? Poof. Approved in an instant. Then, my own voice, flat, cold, clinical. Did you use that for the deposit on the Riverton penthouse? Sloane's voice, snapping. Who cares what I used it for? Nat? It's just family. My voice. It is aggravated identity theft. It is bank fraud. It is a federal felony. And the final, damning lines from Sloane. You're not going to do anything. You know why? Because you're weak. You always have been. You'll go back to your boring little cubicle, and you won't do a thing. You never do. D'Angelo let the recording end. The silence that filled the void was heavier than any sound. The jury members were staring at Sloane, their faces masks of cold disbelief. You're weak, D'Angelo repeated, his voice quiet. He pointed at Sloane. She was wrong. The sister she preyed on was not weak. She was disciplined, and she did not run back to her cubicle. She did her duty. And the defendant? She is not a boss. She is a predator who built a fantasy on the identities of her friends and her own family. The rest was a formality. The Treasury expert testified that the staircase minimum payment plan was a classic kiting scheme, demonstrating calculated, long-term intent. The defense attorney tried, blessedly briefly, to paint it as a family tragedy and a cry for help from a woman under immense social pressure. The judge, looking at the spreadsheet, replied, "The court recognizes the pressure, counselor, but it does not mitigate multiple federal felonies." The AUSA, in his closing, formally upgraded the charges. It was no longer just the initial counts. It was now bank fraud, wire fraud, aggravated identity theft, obstruction of justice, and conducting a continuing financial crime enterprise. The jury was out for less than 2 hours. The foreman, a middle-aged woman, stood to read the verdict. I kept my breathing steady. My heart rate was 55 beats per minute. I was observing the process. On the count of bank fraud, how do you find? Guilty. On the count of wire fraud, how do you find? Guilty. On the count of aggravated identity theft, guilty. On the count of obstruction of justice, guilty. On the count of conducting a continuing financial crime enterprise, guilty. A sound cut through the room, a high, thin wail, like a kettle coming to boil. It was Sloane. She turned in her chair. Her face was a mask of total, abject ruin. The performance was over. The arrogance was gone. All the layers of her constructed life had been stripped away, and all that was left was the terrified, hollow core. She looked at me. For the first time since this began, she truly looked at me. Her eyes were wide, wet, and filled with a desperate, childish plea. She was no longer the star. She was the 6-year-old girl who had broken my mother's favorite vase and was begging me, the older sister, to take the blame. Her gaze was locked on mine. She was waiting. She was waiting for me to stand up, to interrupt the judge, to shout, "Stop! It was a mistake. She is my sister. I forgive her." She was waiting for me to be the sweet little sister, one last time, to save her. I met her gaze. I did not smile. I did not scowl. I did not cry. I did not nod. I did nothing. I just watched. Her expression crumpled. The last ray of hope died. She finally understood. The safe sister, the boring one, was the one person whose discipline she could never break. The bailiff moved toward her. "All rise," the clerk said, as the judge prepared for sentencing. Sloane's eyes never left mine. Even as they cuffed her hands behind her back, she was still looking for an answer, a sign. She received nothing. The guilty verdict was not an end. It was a beginning. It was the moment the calculated, logical consequences I had documented were authorized to transition from digital theory to physical reality. The machine, having rendered its judgment, now moved to execute the balancing of the ledger. While Sloane was processed and moved from a holding cell to a federal transfer center, the Asset Forfeiture Division of the U.S. Marshals Service enacted the court's order. It was swift and impersonal. The Riverton penthouse, its lease secured with the $85,000 from my stolen identity, was the first to go. A team, not of investigators, but of asset managers, arrived. They did not break the door down. They used a key obtained from the building's management. They changed the locks. They placed a large official red and white sticker on the door, declaring it seized property of the United States government. All of Sloane's possessions inside, the custom window treatments, the champagne-colored silk sofa, the marble coffee table, were now inventory, items to be catalogued, appraised, and eventually auctioned. The proceeds would be the first deposit into the Victim Restitution Fund. Her luxury SUV, parked in the building's private garage and paid for with the proceeds of Victim 5's $40,000 loan, was towed. It was not treated like a car. It was treated like a piece of evidence, which it was. The bank accounts, including Borealis Equity LLC and her personal accounts, had been frozen for weeks. Now, they were seized. The funds were transferred, by court order, to a government-controlled escrow account. The jewelry found in the wall safe, including a diamond tennis bracelet she had posted on social media just a month prior, was removed and placed in a federal vault. The empire she had built, the entire curated boss life, was dismantled in less than 24 hours, reduced to a series of inventory tags and auction lot numbers. Simultaneously, the second phase of the process began: victim restoration. The AUSA's office sent out formal, official letters to the other 7 victims. This included my parents. The letters were not gentle. They were legal notifications, confirming that they had been identified as victims in a federal fraud case. United States v. Sloan Whitaker. They were provided a case number, a link to the Victim Services portal, and a dedicated phone number for the task force's technical assistance team. This was the team I had once worked with. I knew exactly what they were doing. They were not therapists. They were data surgeons. They were helping the victims, one by one, execute the credit freezes I had advised my parents to enact. They were walking them through the FTC affidavit, but their real work was deeper. They were interfacing directly with the credit bureaus, armed with the court order. They were manually excising the fraudulent trade lines from the victims' reports. They were submitting the proof, the staircase spreadsheet, the forged applications, to have the inquiries, the late payments, and the delinquent accounts themselves permanently deleted, not just marked as disputed. They were, line by line, rebuilding the clean credit profiles that Sloan had vandalized. It was a painstaking, administrative, and profoundly important process. During this period, Sloan's professional life was also being systematically erased. The State Financial Board, notified by the AUSA's office of her conviction on multiple felonies related to financial crime, permanently revoked her license to operate as a financial consultant or broker. She was barred, for life, from working in any industry regulated by the SEC or FINRA. Her name was added to a federal debarment list, a permanent black mark. Her social network, the audience she had so desperately cultivated, evaporated. The friends who had commented with fire emojis on her penthouse pictures did not show up to her sentencing. Her name became toxic, a whisper at the galas she used to attend. Her social media accounts, which she could no longer access, became digital tombstones, silent monuments to a life built on vapor. 2 weeks after the verdict, I received a call. It was my father. His voice was not angry. It was not pleading. It was the flat, tired voice of a man who had accepted a new, diminished reality. "Natalie," he said, "your mother and we are at our lawyer's office. He has some questions about the new trust he is drafting." "Okay," I said, my voice neutral. "Put him on." The lawyer, a man I did not know, came on the line. He was all business. "Ms. Whitaker, I understand you are the expert in this field. Your parents are establishing a new revocable living trust and a pour-over will. They have requested Sloan Whitaker be removed as the primary executor and successor trustee." "That is a logical step," I said. "Yes, they are also requesting my firm add a no-contest clause, an in terrorem clause, specifically citing any attempt by Ms. Sloan Whitaker to contest the will based on her status as a creditor, which she is not. My question is, given the federal judgment against her for restitution, is there any way she could attempt to attach her restitution payments to their estate in the future? Could she claim they owed her something?" It was a complex, paranoid question, the kind born of true betrayal. "The restitution is owed to the victims, not by them," I explained, falling into my professional tone. "The judgment is against her. As an individual, it cannot be converted into a debt owed by the estate. The no-contest clause is wise. It will ensure that if she ever attempts to challenge the new will, which will presumably leave her nothing, she will be automatically disinherited, even from a symbolic $1 bequest. It protects the estate from the cost of frivolous litigation." "I see. That's very clear. Thank you. Ms. Whitaker, you have been most helpful." He handed the phone back to my father. "Thank you, Natalie," my father said. It was a simple, Honest statement. A late one. You're welcome, Dad. Make sure you get a copy of the executed documents. I will, he said, and hung up. There was no, I love you, no, how are you? It was a transaction. They had been the parents of a star. Now they were the clients of their remaining daughter, the administrator. The roles were definitively reversed. The next day, I was summoned to Deputy Director Maddox's office. I entered. She was, as always, already working, her screen filled with data I did not recognize. Sit, Whitaker, she said, not looking up. I sat. She finished typing a command and then swiveled her chair to face me. The AUSA's office, she began, has officially closed its prosecution phase of FW 31-9X. The sentencing is next week, but the work is done. They have extended their official commendation to this office, and specifically to you. I inclined my head. That is good to hear, Director. It is, she said, leaning forward. But it is not why you are here. I have reviewed your case package. I have reviewed your testimony. I have reviewed the chain of custody you established before your recusal. It was, and I quote the U.S. Attorney, as clean as glass. You took a catastrophic personal violation and converted it into a textbook case, free of emotional contamination, free of procedural error. You built a perfect, sterile box. I followed protocol. Director. You did more than that, she said, a rare note of something almost warm in her voice. You demonstrated a level of discipline and objectivity that is rare. Even here, she steepled her fingers. The department is forming a new national task force. Its mandate will be to investigate complex, multi-jurisdictional identity fraud rings, specifically, the brokers and facilitators who sell these packaged identities. Like the one your sister bought, it will be a joint operation between FOBI, Treasury, and the Secret Service. She slid a single-page document across her desk. It was an official letter of appointment. They need a lead, Maddox said. Someone to build the protocols, someone who understands the digital trail and the human element, but who is not swayed by it. The recommendation is for you to lead it. I looked at the paper. Appointment. Lead investigator. National Identity Fraud Task Force. It was a significant promotion. It was a recognition not of the result, but of the process. I picked up the pen on her desk. I signed my name at the bottom, Natalie Whitaker, small, angular, and efficient. I did not smile. My heart rate did not quicken. The quiet satisfaction I felt was not joy. It was the feeling of a complex equation being correctly solved. It was the pleasure of proper procedure being rewarded with more, and more important, procedure. Good, she said, taking the paper back. Do not let me down. Dismissed. I walked back to my desk. The next afternoon, my personal phone rang. It was my mother. Her voice was hesitant, small. Natalie? I am looking at one of these forms. The ones from the credit bureau. The dispute form. Which one? I asked, opening my email. The one for TransUnion. I am trying to fill it out. Line 4B. It asks for the date of last activity on the fraudulent account. I do not know what to write. The man from your office sent the statements, but there are so many dates. She was not crying. She was not accusing. She was asking for help filling out a form. I pulled up the file from the Victim Services portal. Look at the last statement from Seaside National. Mom, the one for the card in your name, the date of the last minimum payment made by the subject. It should be on the top right. Oh, she said, a small sound of discovery. Yes, I see it. Okay, thank you, Natalie. You're welcome. Mom, make sure you send it certified mail. I will, she said. She paused, as if she wanted to say more, as if she wanted to bridge the vast, cold distance between us. But she could not. The new dynamic was set. I was the expert. She was the victim. We were no longer family. Not in the way we had been. We were just two nodes on a rebalanced chart. Goodbye, Mom. Goodbye. I hung up. I finished the report I was working on. I sent it to Maddox. I closed the file. My desk was, for a moment, clear. Then, my internal inbox pinged. A new assignment. It was not from the task force. That would start next month. It was just another case. I opened it. A new victim. A new set of data. A new, complex problem of fraud. I pulled my keyboard closer. The work continued. The sentencing hearing was a formality. It was not a trial of guilt, but an accounting of consequence. I sat in the third row, in the same seat. The room was mostly empty, save for the court officers, the legal teams, and a few reporters in the back. My parents were not there. Sloane was brought in. She was wearing the same gray pantsuit. The terror she had worn at the verdict had now settled, calcifying into a permanent mask of hollow shock. She looked like a stranger, a ghost. IOSA. D'Angelo stood. He did not address Sloane. He addressed the judge. He was not arguing for guilt. He was presenting the bill. Your Honor, the government asks that the court consider several aggravating factors when determining the sentence. This was not a crime of simple greed. It was a calculated, long-term pattern of predatory behavior. He listed them. His voice was a calm, steady metronome of facts. First, the profound abuse of trust. The defendant did not just target strangers. She systematically preyed upon her own family. She used her sister, the primary witness, and she used her own parents, forging their signatures and compromising their financial security, all while performing the role of a loving daughter. Second, the sophistication and premeditation of the crimes. We refer the court again to Exhibit G, the staircase spreadsheet. This was not an impulse. This was an 18-month business plan built on fraud. She was not in a hole, digging her way out. She was at the bottom, building a staircase out of other people's identities. Third, the clear and undeniable pattern of obstruction. When her crimes began to surface, her immediate reaction was not remorse. It was aggression. She sent threatening text messages to the primary victim, her own sister, in an attempt to intimidate a federal witness. She was actively researching offshore accounts in Crescent K. This demonstrates a consciousness of guilt and a clear intent to escape the consequences of her actions. He sat down. Sloane's defense attorney stood. He looked tired. He knew the facts were not on his side, so he reached for the only thing left, the failed narrative. Your Honor, he began, his voice soft. My client, Ms. Whitaker, she is not the monster the government has painted her to be. She is a product of our times, a woman who buckled under the immense, crushing pressure to succeed, the pressure of social media, of appearances, the pressure to be someone. She made a terrible mistake. She knows that. But this was a cry for help. The judge, a man who had presided over this court for 2 decades, looked at the defense attorney. He did not look angry. He simply looked at the man, then at the stack of evidence folders on his bench. The court recognizes the pressure you speak of, Counselor, the judge said, his voice cutting through the quiet. It is a pressure we all face, but it does not, in this court, mitigate the calculated theft of over $400,000. The court notes the defendant's cry for help. The court also notes the 8 victims who were crying for theirs. The defendant's focus was on her image. This court's focus must be on the damage she inflicted and the rule of law she violated. The judge looked down at Sloane. Ms. Whitaker, you have demonstrated a profound and disturbing lack of empathy. You weaponize the trust of those closest to you to fund a life of pure fiction. You are a danger not just to the financial system, but to every person who knows your name. The damage you have done is not just financial, it is a deep, structural betrayal. He picked up the sentencing sheet. Pursuant to the federal sentencing guidelines, and in light of the multiple aggravating factors, this court sentences you, Sloane Whitaker, to a term of 96 months in the federal penitentiary system, 8 years. This sentence will be followed by a term of 3 years of supervised release. You will be barred, permanently, from working in any financial capacity, and you are hereby ordered to pay full restitution to all 8 victims, in the total amount of $402,710. A payment schedule will be determined by the Federal Victims Fund. The judge looked up. This is the judgment of the court. He lifted his gavel. It came down with a sharp, dry crack. It was a sound of absolute finality. It was not a sound of anger. It was the sound of a lock clicking shut, of a long, arrogant, chaotic sentence finally meeting its period. Sloane's head snapped up at the sound of the gavel. 96 months. The number had clearly, finally, landed. She stood, her body rigid, as the bailiffs moved toward her, and then she did it. The last play. The one she had been holding on to. The one that had been her safety net since childhood. She turned. She looked past her attorney, past the empty benches, her eyes searching the third row. Her gaze locked with mine. The terror, the shock, the anger. It all fell away. Her face crumpled. Her eyes were wide, wet, and utterly broken. It was the same look she had given me when she was 9, after she had broken our father's antique watch and begged me to lie for her. She was not looking at an investigator. She was not looking at a victim. She was looking at her sweet, weak little sister. She was begging me to stand up, to scream, to cry, to run to the judge and tell him it was all a mistake, that I forgave her, that she was my sister, to stop this. Her life, in that one desperate second, hinged on her absolute, unshakable belief in my weakness. I met her stare. I did not move. My face was still. My hands were resting in my lap. I did not look away. I did not offer a nod of pity. I did not offer a flicker of hatred. I offered her nothing. I was just a mirror reflecting the judgment that had just been passed. Her face, when she saw the absolute zero of my expression, collapsed. The last thread of hope, the final belief that I would save her, snapped. She finally understood. Discipline does not rescue fraud. She turned away, a hollowed-out shell, and let the bailiffs cuff her hands. I watched her be led out of the courtroom. I did not stand. I did not look back. I reached into my suit jacket and pulled out my small, government-issue notebook and a pen. I opened it to a new page. I wrote the date. I wrote the time. And I wrote, Case FW31-9X, closed. I left the courtroom and walked out of the federal building. The air in the parking garage was cold and damp. Whitaker. I stopped. Deputy Director Maddox was standing by her own black sedan, her keys in her hand. I turned to face her. She looked at me, her expression unreadable. She nodded once, a short, sharp gesture. You did good, she said. It was not a medal. It was not a commendation. It was more than enough. Thank you, Director, I said. She got in her car and drove away. I walked to my own vehicle, a 7-year-old sedan. It was beige. It was boring. It was predictable. And it was paid for. I got in. The engine started with a quiet, reliable hum. Freedom. I thought, always runs quietly. It does not need to be loud. I sat for a moment in the silence. I took out my personal cell phone. I opened my text messages. I did not call my parents. I did not call anyone. I sent a single, encrypted text to the lead technician at the Victim Services Restoration Team. The message was 4 words. Sentencing complete. Initiate restitution protocols now. The real work, the work of healing the damage, could begin. I put the phone down. I put the car in reverse. The car door closed with a soft, solid thunk. There was no music. There was no victory lap. There was only the quiet, profound silence of justice having, finally, completed its work. It was not revenge. It was compliance. And compliance, today, had protected the right people. Thank you so much for listening to my story. I am so curious. Where in the world are you listening from? Let me know in the comments below so we can connect. And please share your thoughts on this. If you enjoyed this, please subscribe to Lila Revenge Stories, like this video, and give it an extra boost by hitting that hype button so more people can hear this.